I sent a cruel audio to my wife's lover while they were together saying, "Divorce is on the way." She listened. I knew she would listen. And he knew exactly what would happen next. Panic took over her. The desperation of a woman who, until that moment, believed that her dirty game was under control. But I was one step ahead. She tried to call me. Insistently. Once, twice, 3 times. But I just ignored it, coldly, without any rush. I didn't need to hear her voice anymore. I didn't need any more lame justification. I already knew everything. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a slip-up. It was a choice. She chose to deceive me. He chose to change me. He chose to lie to me every night he lay next to me, pretending love, pretending loyalty. And I chose to end this charade. But what she didn't know was that by the time she decided to beg for my forgiveness, it would already be too late. My hands shook as I pressed the audio send button. But it wasn't sadness. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, more cruel. Something I didn't recognize within myself until that moment. I wanted it to hurt. I wanted her to feel what I was feeling. I wanted her to know that I wasn't the naive man she thought I was. She didn't just lose a husband. She lost an ally. Lost a home. She lost the respect of those who once truly loved her. The silence on my cell phone gave me bitter pleasure. I could imagine them frozen, the air becoming heavy around them, the guilty looks, the pathetic attempt at disguise. He, not knowing what to say. She, with her eyes wide, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Your body frozen by the fear of losing everything. But it wasn't fear of losing me. No. It was fear of what that meant. What would I do with the information I had at hand? I imagined her holding the phone, her hands shaking, typing a desperate message to me. Maybe she was trying to justify herself. Maybe he would invent some absurd excuse, typical of someone caught in the act. But no words from her would change what I knew. No amount of justification would make the nights I spent questioning myself disappear. No lie would erase the scenes that were recorded in my mind like a horror movie. I stood up, feeling the weight of that moment. It was like a part of me was dying right there. But another was being reborn. I was no longer the man she knew. The fool in love. The loyal husband who trusted blindly. No. I became something different. Something stronger. And I was ready to take justice for myself. The hours dragged on and she tried to call me again. This time, with more insistence. But I already knew the game had changed. And the only thing left for her was to wait. Waiting to see what would happen. Waiting to find out how far I was willing to go. And I was willing to go all the way. When I finally answered, the desperation in her voice was evident. She tried to sound calm, but her heavy breathing betrayed her. "Please, let me explain," she whispered, as if her lover was still there, listening to everything. As if there was something to be said that would change what was already done. I took a deep breath, letting a cruel silence drag on. She expected me to ask why. That I would give you a chance to shed fake tears and promise I would never do that again. But I didn't ask anything. I only said a single sentence. "I'm already sorting everything out." And I hung up. I knew that, in that instant, she understood. He understood that he had lost. That your lies would no longer have space. That her story with me had ended there. But what she didn't know was that her punishment was just beginning. She never imagined that I already had a lawyer. You never imagined that the divorce papers were ready before the audio was even sent. You never imagined that I was about to turn your life upside down. And her lover? That was another problem. Another dirty detail of this story. A detail that would also have its own punishment. She thought she would have time. He thought he could manipulate me. But her time is up. Now, it was my turn to play. And I wouldn't miss this chance. I knew that sooner or later she would knock on my door. I would try to convince myself that there was still something between us. But the only thing that remained was the taste of betrayal. She betrayed me. And now, I was about to betray her back. But in a way she would never forget. And when it was all over, when she had nothing left but regret and the weight of her own choices, she would finally understand. I would understand that some betrayals are costly. Much more expensive than she could afford. The only question was, what would happen when she realized she lost everything? Welcome to the channel. Here, we do not support cheating. Never. The stories you will hear are fictional, but the morals are real. Betrayal destroys homes, corrodes relationships and leaves irreversible marks. Each narrative will show how choices have consequences, and some are irreparable. Now, get ready for a shocking story. A betrayal is about to be exposed, and the consequences will be devastating. In the comfortable silence of that spacious house, where every corner seemed full of memories built over the years, Ethan and Olivia they lived in what, for many, would be considered a stable marriage. Time had shaped their relationship in subtle ways, transforming the passionate intensity of the early years into something more serene, predictable, almost methodical. But within this predictability, there was also a certain comfort. A kind of love that, even without the same youthful outbursts, still seemed enough to keep the marriage going. Ethan was a dedicated man, meticulous in everything he did. He was always the guy who planned the next steps, who kept the house organized and made sure everything was always in order. From an early age, he built a solid career as a civil engineer, a field that required precision and patience, characteristics that also spilled over into his personal life. Marriage to Olivia never seemed like a mistake or a burden, but rather a conscious choice, based on complicity and respect. He liked to believe that they had built a strong foundation together, something that would stand the test of time and hardship. However, lately, something was bothering him. Little things that, if observed in isolation, might not mean much, but that, when put together, formed a mosaic of disquiet that was difficult to ignore. Olivia, in turn, had always been a charming woman. Owner of a captivating smile and a magnetic presence, she had that sweet and kind way that made any environment feel lighter. He worked in interior design, and his creativity showed not only in his work, but in everything he touched. If Ethan was methodical and predictable, Olivia was spontaneous and vibrant. This dynamic always worked well between the two, complementing each other in ways that felt natural. But over time, her spontaneity began to become more distant from him, as if something was pulling her away. Small moments of distraction, lost glances, a cell phone always within reach. Subtle changes, but ones that Ethan noticed, even without knowing exactly what they meant. In the early years, the two were inseparable. He clearly remembered the nights they stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing, sharing secrets and laughter. But now, the silence between them was different. It was no longer the comfortable silence of someone who had already said everything that needed to be said, but rather the silence of someone who avoided conversations that could reveal uncomfortable truths. Ethan tried to push away the negative thoughts. He wasn't an insecure man, and he didn't want to be someone who saw problems where they didn't exist. But he couldn't deny that something was different. Olivia spent more time outside than before. His schedules had become unstable, his explanations vague. The work, she said. Always work. New projects, last-minute meetings, tight deadlines. And Ethan believed. Or at least, I tried to believe it. But inside him, something stirred, a primal instinct that whispered that there was more to this than just professional commitments. He ignored this instinct, because trust was something that had always been a part of him. Trust was what kept everything going. The nights when Olivia went out and arrived late became more frequent. And when he was at home, his attention often didn't seem completely present. The cell phone vibrated with messages that she read quickly before putting it in her pocket, as if they were trivial. But they weren't. Ethan didn't know exactly why it bothered him so much, but he knew it did. I knew something was wrong. Still, he insisted on maintaining normality. He continued to prepare breakfast for the two of them every morning, even when Olivia seemed too rushed to sit down and share those moments with him. He continued to leave affectionate notes on the table, small gestures that might not even be noticed anymore. He continued trying to restore the connection between them, ignoring the feeling that he was holding something that was slowly slipping through his fingers. Weekends once filled with outings and dinners now seemed empty. Olivia always had an excuse: tired, unexpected commitments, something that needed to be resolved. And Ethan accepted, even though he felt that he was increasingly alone in his own house. But he didn't confront. I didn't ask. Because part of him still wanted to believe it was just a phase, that their marriage wasn't being eroded by something he couldn't see. Even in the bedroom, the changes were noticeable. Her touch, once so natural and enveloping, now seemed distant. The kisses no longer had the same heat, the hugs seemed distracted. There was an invisible space between the two, something he couldn't break. And every time she tried, Olivia backed away, with gentle but always the same excuses. Ethan began to question whether he was overreacting. Maybe it was just the weight of the routine. Maybe they were just going through a difficult phase. But then, the patterns started to repeat themselves. And when patterns repeat themselves, they are no longer coincidences. One night, when he arrived home from work, he found Olivia looking too dressed up for someone who said she was just going to meet a friend. The dress was new, the makeup was impeccable. And yet, she didn't even give him a kiss when she left. She just smiled, too quick a smile, and was out the door before he could ask anything. He stood there, looking at the closed door, feeling a strange emptiness come over him. Something that I couldn't name, but that weighed on my chest like an unspoken truth. And then came the first lies. Small contradictions. Things that didn't fit. Schedules that didn't make sense. Places that didn't match what she said. It was at that moment that Ethan realized he could no longer ignore what was right in front of him. He didn't want to be a paranoid husband. I didn't want to be the one who doubted without proof. But he also couldn't be naive. So, for the first time, he decided to observe. Just observe. I wouldn't confront, I wouldn't ask. I would just pay attention to every detail. He still didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he knew he would find something. And when I found it, I would be sure I needed it. But what he didn't imagine was that this search would lead him to a truth much crueler than he could bear. The next few weeks were a silent game between Ethan and Olivia. He watched. She pretended to be normal. The small details that had previously seemed insignificant were now pieces of a puzzle that he still couldn't completely put together. The way she looked away when he asked something simple, the way she quickly turned off her cell phone when he approached, the long baths with the phone always within reach. None of this made sense in isolation, but together, they formed an image that he didn't want to see. Ethan had never been a man of assumptions. I liked concrete facts, certainties. But that doubt that grew inside him was unbearable. The weight of uncertainty was more suffocating than the truth, whatever it was. He needed to know. He needed to understand what was happening, even if it meant facing something he feared. Olivia seemed too calm. The kind of tranquility that comes when someone has already made their choices and feels comfortable in them. And that killed him. One night, while she was taking a shower, he took her cell phone. It wasn't something he usually did, but he needed answers. His heart hammered in his chest as his fingers slid across the screen. The messages were deleted. Clear call history. No trace. Nothing that could prove anything. But that, in itself, was proof. Olivia never deleted messages. Never deleted calls. If he did that now, it was because there was something to hide. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He swallowed hard and placed his cell phone in the same place. If there had been any doubt before, there was none now. Betrayal was no longer just in his head. She was there, in the silence of carefully constructed lies. In her caution. In your calculated coldness. Ethan felt a wave of anger rise within him, but he held himself back. It was not the time to act. Not yet. Over the next few days, Olivia maintained her usual routine. I always left at the same times, citing work, meetings with friends, dinners that came up at the last minute. And Ethan listened. I agreed. I pretended to believe. But inside him, every fake smile of hers was like a knife stuck in his chest. He wouldn't confront her without proof. He wouldn't give her the chance to deny it, to distort the truth. He needed to see it with his own eyes. I needed final confirmation. On Friday, Olivia dressed up more than usual. New dress, impeccable makeup, striking perfume. He said he had an important dinner with a client. She kissed Ethan briefly, almost automatically, and hurried away. He waited a few minutes before grabbing his car keys and following behind. He didn't need to follow her for long. She drove without hesitation, like someone who already knew the route well. He parked in front of a discreet but elegant restaurant. Ethan stayed inside the car, watching from a distance. Minutes later, a man appeared. Tall, well-dressed, self-assured. Olivia smiled when she saw him. A different smile, one Ethan hadn't seen in a long time. She touched the man's arm with familiarity, with intimacy. Something inside him shattered in that instant. He continued to watch as they entered the restaurant together, chatting casually, like a couple who didn't need to hide anything. As if nothing that was happening there was wrong. The betrayal was there, in front of him, clear as day. They weren't just suspicions. It wasn't his mind playing tricks. It was real. And it hurt in a way he could never describe. The trust, the love, the years shared, everything seemed insignificant in that scene. Olivia didn't hesitate. He didn't look around. He didn't seem to carry any weight on his conscience. Ethan could have walked in there, made a fuss, demanded explanations. But no. He just stood there, feeling the anger and pain mix into something more dangerous. Something cold. Something silent. If Olivia thought she could move on without consequences, she was wrong. Because he was no longer the man she trusted blindly. He was no longer the man who would accept crumbs. Her betrayal wouldn't just be a mistake. It would be a point of no return. He took out his cell phone and started typing. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clearer than ever. The time had come. The game was over. And Olivia didn't even imagine what was coming. Ethan felt his heart hammer against his chest as he walked toward the house. The silence of the night felt deafening, the cold wind biting into your skin, but none of that mattered. The blood boiled in his veins, mixing anger, pain and unshakable determination. He had already made his decision. Olivia had no idea what was coming. She might have thought her betrayal would go unpunished, but it didn't. Not this time. He opened the door slowly, his steps firm, calculated. The room was lit only by the dim light from the kitchen, casting shadows around the corners of the house. Olivia was sitting on the couch, absent-mindedly scrolling through her cell phone. When he heard the sound of the door closing, he lifted his head, forcing a smile. Guilt danced subtly in her eyes, but she tried to hide it. Ethan crossed the room slowly, keeping his gaze fixed on her. I didn't say anything right away. He just sat in the armchair in front of him, the silence between them becoming a suffocating weight. Olivia bit her lip, uneasy. He never behaved like that. She tried to keep it natural, but her voice came out hesitant. Is everything okay? You seem strange. Ethan leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, studying every expression on her face. I know, he said, his voice low but carrying something that made Olivia flinch slightly. She blinked rapidly, trying to look confused. You know what? He watched as she looked away, discomfort growing. I know everything, Olivia. I know where you were tonight. I know who you were with. I've known for a lot longer than you realize. The silence that followed was devastating. Her face paled. The lips parted, but no words came out. Her rapid breathing betrayed the panic growing within her. Ethan, He raised his hand, cutting off any pathetic attempt at explanation. Don't lie to me. Don't make excuses. Don't try to make me look stupid. Because, contrary to what you think, I'm not. She flinched. The security that always carried in his voice wavered. I can explain. Explain what? That you cheated on me. That you lied to me repeatedly. That you shared things with another man that should have been ours alone. Say, Olivia, what part do you think I don't understand? Her eyes filled with tears. She opened and closed her mouth a few times, desperately searching for words that could fix what was crumbling before her. It was a mistake. Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in his laugh. It was cold. Cutting. A mistake. How many times did that mistake happen? How many lies did you tell to cover up that mistake? Olivia covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. I never wanted to hurt you. But it hurt, he said, his voice filled with deep, irreparable pain. You hurt because you chose to do this. You changed me. You betrayed me. You deceived me without hesitation. So tell me, what exactly did you think would happen when I found out? She sobbed, shaking her head. I don't know. I was confused. Ethan clenched his fists. Hatred fought against disgust. Confused? No. You knew exactly what you were doing. She swallowed hard. He didn't give him any gaps. There was no way out. But then, in the midst of his anguish, something changed. His look became different. As if something inside her was breaking. As if he finally understood that there was no longer any way to manipulate the situation. You're right, she said, her voice shaking. I did all this. I lied. I cheated. I cheated. But it wasn't because I stopped loving you. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. Do you have the courage to talk about love after all this? She closed her eyes tightly. He took a deep breath. When he looked at it again, it looked different. Like he was about to say something he didn't want to say, but knew he needed to. There's something you need to know, Ethan. He didn't respond. Just waited. Olivia brought her hands to her face, massaging her temples, her eyes full of tears and despair. I never wanted it to be like this. But I had no choice. Ethan frowned. What are you talking about? Her breathing became irregular. His voice was low, almost a whisper. I knew that when you found out, everything between us would end. But what I didn't want was for you to find out in the worst way possible. Ethan kept his expression cold, but inside him, something stirred. I'm listening. Olivia hesitated. Their fingers intertwined, nails digging into the skin. I cheated on you, but the worst is who I did it to. The silence that followed was crushing. Time seemed to have stopped. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. With who, Olivia? She trembled. The tears fell silently down his face. With someone who has always been close to you. Ethan's breathing quickened. His mind began to work overtime, searching through all the possibilities. His chest rose and fell hard, tension building. Say it at once. Olivia closed her eyes. When he opened them again, there was absolute despair there. With someone you would never imagine. With someone who has always been a part of your life. Ethan jumped to his feet, blood running cold through his veins. Say, Olivia. Who was it? The sound of the door opening made them both turn around at the same time. And then, standing there in the doorway, was he. The shock was instantaneous. Ethan's stomach dropped. The air was knocked from his lungs. His vision went dark for a brief moment as the truth hit him like a punch to the chest. He stared into that familiar face, the eyes he knew so well, and felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Your own best friend. The betrayal wasn't just about Olivia. It was about the man he considered like a brother. The person he trusted without hesitation. And then, finally, it all made sense. Hidden encounters. Conversations interrupted. The lame excuses. The weight of empty nights. The anger that gripped Ethan was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was pure fire, burning everything around, destroying any trace of the life he thought he had. He didn't know what he would do in the next few seconds. But I knew that nothing would be like before. The silence in the room was unbearable. The air felt thick, charged with something invisible but overwhelming. Ethan felt his chest rise and fall erratically, as if his own body was struggling to understand what had just happened. There he was. Your best friend. The man who was present in the most important moments of your life. Someone he trusted, who knew his secrets, his pains, his dreams. Someone who, for years, he called his brother. His eyes met Olivia's, then back to Ethan. There was guilt there. An almost palpable fear, as if he knew there was nothing more to be said that could alleviate what had just been revealed. But Ethan wanted words. He wanted to hear it from his mouth. Because only then would the betrayal be complete. He speaks. Ethan's voice was deep, heavy, filled with contained fury. I want to hear from you. His best friend hesitated. The lips parted, but no words came out. Olivia hung her head, tears streaming down her face. Ethan took a step forward, his entire body shaking. Say it. Tell me what you did. I want you to have the courage to admit it, just like you had the courage to stab me in the back. The other man swallowed hard, looking away. I never wanted it to be like this. Ethan's laugh was bitter. No. So explain to me, how exactly did you want it to be? He ran his hands over his face, his expression filled with shame. I don't know. I lost myself, man. It was happening. I didn't want to hurt you. Didn't you want to hurt me? Ethan took another step forward, his entire body tense. You slept with my wife and you have the nerve to say you didn't want to hurt me? Olivia sobbed, her breathing ragged. I tried to stop. Ethan turned sharply to her. To stop. He shook his head in disbelief. This didn't happen once, Olivia. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a choice. A choice repeated. Multiple times. You both did it knowing exactly what it meant. And you kept going. The room fell silent. The seconds dragged by, heavy as lead. Ethan looked around. The house that had once been his home now seemed like a nightmare scenario he wanted to wake up from. Every piece of furniture, every detail around it, carried a story that suddenly became irrelevant. Nothing else mattered. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to find some shred of rationality within himself. But all he found was a growing emptiness. How long has it been? The friend hesitated. Olivia tried to respond, but Ethan held up his hand to silence her. He wanted to hear from him. From the traitor. The man took a deep breath before responding. Almost a year. The confirmation was a blow. Ethan staggered back a step, as if he had been punched in the stomach. 1 year. A whole year living next to a lie. Trusting those who didn't deserve it. Believing that his life was intact, when, in fact, it was slowly falling apart. And then, something inside him just died. He straightened his shoulders. His expression hardened. The shock, the explosive anger, the indignation, it all dissipated, giving way to something much worse. Indifference. He looked at Olivia, his eyes empty of any trace of the man who once loved her. "I want you out of here." Her eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me." His voice was calm. Almost scary. "Grab your things and leave. Now." She began to shake her head frantically. "Ethan, please. I made a mistake, but that doesn't mean he arrives." He cut in, his patience non-existent. "I don't want to hear any more." She got up from the couch, her hands shaking. "Ethan, please don't do it like that." He just pointed to the door. "Get out of my house." The pain on her face was evident. But it wasn't pain for the betrayal he committed. It wasn't true repentance. It was fear. Fear of consequences. Fear of what would come later. The friend tried to intervene. "Dude, calm down, let's talk," Ethan laughed again. "Talk? Do you really think there's anything to talk about?" He looked at the two. The cheating couple. The two people who destroyed his confidence the most. "You've already made your choice. Now deal with it." Olivia hesitated once again, but when she saw that Ethan wasn't going to give in, she finally moved. He went up the stairs and, in a few minutes, came down with a suitcase. The eyes were red, the face was stained with tears. She stopped at the door, turning to him one last time. "Ethan. I know you hate me now, but I really loved you. I really did." He didn't say anything. He just remained there, motionless, watching her walk out the door. Her friend hesitated, but soon followed her. And then, the house fell silent. Ethan took a deep breath, closing his eyes. The weight of the moment was crushing, but somehow he felt lighter. As if, for the first time in months, he could truly breathe. He didn't know exactly what would come next. He didn't know what his life would be like from then on. But he knew one thing. He would no longer be the man who accepted the lies. He would no longer be the man who trusted blindly. He was someone new. And this new version of him I wouldn't look back. The silence in that house felt different now. Before, it was suffocating, full of suspicions and uncertainties, of unanswered questions, of anguish. Now, it was an absolute emptiness, but, in a way, liberating. Ethan felt the weight of betrayal still present in every room, in the walls that once held laughter, in the furniture that witnessed moments of affection, in the memories that, from one moment to the next, lost any value. He remained there for a while, standing in the middle of the room, breathing deeply, trying to process everything that had happened. But there was a strange tranquility in his mind. The pain hadn't gone away, but it had turned into something different. He climbed the stairs slowly, as if he were walking over the wreckage of a life that no longer existed. The room that had once been his refuge was now a landscape of distorted memories. The smell of her perfume still hung in the air, but instead of causing longing, it disgusted. He looked around, taking in every detail, every photograph, every trace of a relationship that now seemed like a big mistake. And then, without hesitation, he started ripping everything out. Picture frames were the first. He picked them up one by one and unceremoniously threw them to the ground. The glass shattered, scattering like small fragments of the illusion he had carried for so long. Her clothes were still there, hanging in the closet, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Without thinking twice, he started taking them off the hangers, throwing everything into bags. He wanted to erase any trace of his presence. He wanted to get rid of the dead weight of that story that had been built on lies. The cell phone vibrated in his pocket. He knew who he was. I didn't need to look. He knew that Olivia would try to talk to him, that she would try to mend the unmendable. But he was no longer willing to listen. He let the sound get lost in the silence of the night, ignoring each attempt at contact. She had made her choice. Now, he would do his. Hours passed, but Ethan didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed, facing the wall, feeling exhaustion taking over his body, but not his mind. His head spun, reliving every detail, every lie, every time he trusted her blindly without realizing what was happening before his eyes. But, even though the anger was still there, something inside him said that it wasn't worth spending it on Olivia anymore. She was no longer part of his life. And he needed to follow. The next morning, he drank bitter coffee, the only thing that went down his throat. He looked around and realized that his house no longer felt like his own. It was a strange place now, as if it no longer belonged there. But he still had control over one thing, what he would do from now on. He took the bags full of her clothes and drove slowly to a destination she would never have imagined. The door opened after a few rings. The woman on the other side raised her eyebrows in surprise. He held her gaze for a moment, then simply placed the bags at her feet. "This belongs to your husband." She was in shock. For a few seconds, I said nothing. Then he looked at the contents of the bags and his face changed, surprise turning into a mixture of anger and humiliation. "Are you telling me that?" Ethan crossed his arms, firmly. "You already know the answer." She pursed her lips, took a deep breath, and for a moment she didn't seem to know whether to scream or cry. He didn't stay to see. He just turned his back and left, leaving her there, alone, with the truth that had just exploded into her life. Just as he had been forced to deal with his own. Upon returning home, he picked up his cell phone and, without hesitation, blocked all forms of contact with Olivia and the one he once called his best friend. They no longer existed for him. Time passed strangely. The days were long, the nights endless. But, little by little, the pain began to lose strength. The emptiness began to give way to something new. One night, while walking aimlessly, he found a small, cozy cafe. The kind of place where people went to forget about the world for a while. He sat down, ordered a strong coffee and stood there, watching the street through the window, trying to absorb the feeling of being alone, but no longer lost. That's when she appeared. Without any warning, she sat at the next table, distractedly, leafing through a book, while distractedly stirring her tea. There was something calm about her, something that didn't scream for attention, but still held your gaze. And for some reason, he didn't dodge. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was ready to look ahead. The smell of hot coffee rose in the air, mixing with the faint aroma of cinnamon that wafted through the small cafe. Ethan wasn't sure why he had come here, but he felt like he needed a place where he could just exist without the shadow of the past weighing down on him. The cup between his hands emanated heat, but he still felt the internal cold of everything he had lost. He looked at the woman sitting at the next table. The book in his hands seemed to absorb all of his attention, his eyes sliding across the pages, his lips moving softly as he read in silence. There was something about her that aroused his curiosity. Not in a romantic way, not yet. But a simple, human curiosity. A desire to know who she was, what she was doing there, if her life was as silent and lonely as his at that moment. She noticed the look and looked up, offering a shy smile. "Good story?" he asked, pointing to the book. She hesitated for a moment, as if considering whether it was worth interacting with a stranger, but then nodded. "Yeah. But a little sad." Ethan smiled slightly. Sad stories are often more real. She closed the book slowly, studying it for a moment before tilting her head slightly to the side. "You seem like someone who understands sad stories." He let out a nasal, humorless laugh. "I could write a book." She didn't ask anything. He just observed for a moment before responding simply, "Everyone carries a little pain. It just changes the way we deal with it." He nodded. It made sense. But he still didn't know how he would deal with his. The conversation did not last long. But something about that encounter stayed with him as he left the cafe and walked into the cold night. For the first time in a long time, he felt that maybe there was something beyond the pain. In the following days, he began to move away from what still tied him to the past. He sold the house, closed the cycle, made room for something new. He didn't look back. He didn't want to know where Olivia was, trying to move on without him or wallowing in his own guilt. It wasn't his problem anymore. Life resumed its flow, but with a new perspective. Ethan rediscovered small pleasures that he hadn't noticed before. Read a book without rushing. Walking without destination. Observe the people around you without feeling suffocated by memories. And then, one day, in the same cafe where fate had presented him with a new face, he met her again. This time, she greeted him first. "I see you're back." He smiled. "I think I'm starting to like it here." She pulled out the chair in front of her and sat down without hesitation. "Then I think we might become habitués." He looked at her for a moment, feeling something different. Not urgency, not the need to fill a void, but just the presence of someone who seemed comfortable being exactly who they were. "And maybe," he said, "this time I won't need a sob story." She smiled. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like his story wasn't over yet. Just started over. The months passed like an icy wind that carried with it the remnants of the past. Ethan didn't try to forget, because he knew forgetting would be impossible. But he learned to carry his story without letting it define him. The weight of the betrayal was still there, but now it was just a scar, a reminder of what he had survived. The pain gave way to reconstruction, and he realized that, although he had never wanted to go through that, there was something liberating about starting over without invisible chains tying him to what no longer existed. He sold the house. The place he once called home no longer made sense to him. "I didn't want to walk through those rooms and feel the echo of what was destroyed." With the money from the sale, he bought a smaller, more modern apartment, where every detail was chosen by him, with no traces of the past. Every new piece of furniture, every painted wall was a symbol that he was not only moving forward, but consciously choosing not to look back. Olivia tried to get in touch a few times. First, short messages, then long audios, full of apologies, regrets and requests for a conversation. Ethan didn't answer any. She wasn't worth his time or attention. What she did could not be erased with empty words. Once, she showed up at the building where he lived, waiting for him to come home. But when he saw her there, standing in the doorway, holding her bag to her chest, her eyes teary, he felt nothing but indifference. She was no longer part of his life. He passed straight by, without looking back. She called his name, her voice thick with desperation, but he entered the elevator and the door closed before she could continue. At that moment, he knew there was nothing left of her inside him. The lover, on the other hand, suffered an even more bitter fate. He lost his job after the truth came out in a way he didn't expect. His wife, devastated to discover everything, not only filed for divorce but made sure he left the house with nothing. She took the children with her, cut off all contact, and he suddenly found himself alone, surrounded only by the consequences of his own choices. He tried to start over somewhere else, but betrayal followed him, becoming a ghost that tarnished his reputation. The friends who once trusted him walked away, and he learned the cruelest way that some betrayals are never forgotten. Ethan, in turn, allowed himself to discover the lightness he had forgotten. In the cafe where he found company for the first time after everything, he began to realize that life went on, and that moving forward didn't mean erasing what happened, but rather learning to live despite it. Little by little, casual conversations became more frequent encounters, and before he knew it, there was someone new filling the empty spaces he thought could never be filled again. No rush, no fear. Just letting it happen. One night, as he walked beside her, he felt something different. It was no longer the shadow of a painful past. There was no longer a need to prove something to yourself or others. It was just the peace of knowing that what was broken may not be rebuilt in the same way, but it could make room for something new. Something better. Now, he wasn't defined by betrayal. He was the man who survived her. Which overcame. Which started again. And that was the biggest victory I could have. Now that the story has come to an end, I want to know your opinion. What did you think of this outcome? Comment here and share your view on the story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Here, we do not support cheating in any form, and each story serves to show how wrong choices can have devastating consequences. If you liked it, leave a like and share so more people can follow. See you in the next story.